This idea of death taking on many forms becomes very real when you realize that there are a lot of fatal consequences to consuming several different substances in certain amounts. In fact, every substance in existence, even something as essential as oxygen, has a lethal dose. Understandably, excessive amounts of any substance can be harmful. For example, 10 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight is considered to be toxic. In other circumstances, a lack of a substance can be just as deadly. If an average-sized individual were to lose 2 liters of blood, then they would die from blood loss. All of these examples are an eternal reminder that our lives are held together by a very fragile balance, and we should definitely live our lives with this fact in mind. The stern writer Askin Nakk Le Vaar's schrift ability, the Deathdealing, takes this fragile balance and flips it upside down. His schrift ability is easily among my favorites to have been introduced during the 1000-year Blood War arc. It's a perfect blend of scientific knowledge and power. As fascinating as this ability is, it functions very mysteriously, and it's for this reason that I hope that you stick around until the very end of this video, as I'll be explaining everything that there is to know about Askin's schrift ability, the Deathdealing. There is a lot to unpack here as we are discussing the powers of one of these Schutzstaffel members. I'll be discussing all of the appearances of the Deathdealing within the story, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll have a better understanding of how this ability functions. Discover the Undead Collection and be amongst the very first to join us on our journey over at Getsuga.com. I cannot lie, personally I never got the feeling that Askin was going to be one of those characters who was going to stick around for a very long time. From his very first appearance within the story, he appeared to be a character whose main draw was his charisma and his fun personality. I assumed that he would have a decently powerful schrift, but nothing that the majority of the Shinigami wouldn't be able to deal with. Askin's role within the story exceeded my expectations when it was revealed that he is in fact an incredibly strong Quincy. He wasn't just simply another fun and fascinating villain within the story, he had proved himself to be a force to be reckoned with. His schrift ability, the Deathdealing, bestows upon him such immense power that Urahara had decided to include him within his elite group, the Schutzstaffel. And despite him now being surrounded by absolute godlike individuals, he still manages to stand out amongst the other Schutzstaffel members. While his peers like Lil Barrow possess overpowered broken abilities like the X-axis, I believe that the Deathdealing is more of a balanced power in comparison. So we first see this ability revealed within chapter 602 of the manga. This occurs during the fall of Squad Zero, which will always be etched into my memory as one of the greatest hero to zero moments within all of fiction. Thankfully, the battle between the Zero Division and the Schutzstaffel has been improved upon heavily within the anime, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what other changes and additions will be made to this battle at the beginning of the third core of the anime. Now, we are aware that Uetsu Nimaya had single-handedly wiped out all of the Schutzstaffel, taking down the likes of Lil, Askin, and Gerard. His one-shot streak had ended after we had found out that Askin wasn't quite dead yet. The fact that Askin had survived after being attacked by Nimaya helps to open up a fascinating discussion about how his unique characteristics perfectly complement his lethal ability. We learn that Askin's schrift, the Deathdealing, necessitates that he needs to endure an extraordinary amount of damage before he can effectively utilize the power of his own schrift. Interestingly, Askin seems to have an innate capacity for surviving attacks that would be fatal to others. He even survived a direct slash to the throat from Nimaya. Askin comments on how Urahara had chosen him specifically to wield the Deathdealing because of his remarkable endurance. It seems as though this aspect of his character had existed even before he had received his schrift from Urahara. I wish that this area of his character was explored a bit more, as I'd love to know more about Askin's backstory. The creator of the Zanpakuto, Nimaya, becomes the first character within Bleach who witnesses Askin utilize his schrift, the Deathdealing. The Sternritter demonstrates his ability to calculate and manipulate the lethal dose of any substance, a skill that he chillingly exhibits by drinking his own blood, which is gushing from his neck wound. This action immediately ends up weakening Nimaya, as Askin uses the Deathdealing to reduce the lethal lethal blood dose within Uetsu Nimaya's body, turning his own blood into a toxic substance for him. The specifics of how blood could become lethal in this way are not entirely explained. In real-world applications, problems can arise when there is too much volume of blood. This is called hypovolemia. It's also known as fluid overload, and it occurs through renal failure, heart failure, liver failure, and also from excessive sodium intake. Hypovolemia is characterized by high blood pressure, swelling within the body, and in general, discomfort within the body like cramps, headaches, and even stomach bloating. The Deathdealing allows Askin to manipulate the threshold of toxicity of blood, so he's not altering the volume of blood within the body. Instead, he is effectively turning a normal volume of blood into a lethal substance. Askin realizes the futility of explaining this to the soon-to-be deceased Nimaya as he abandons his explanation, but suddenly he is then killed in one shot by Nimaya. This is easily one of my favorite one-hit KOs in all of Bleach. The hype from this manga panel is incredibly deceptive because we know how things play out after this. Coming back onto subject, altering the toxicity of a substance is just one of the abilities that this schrift power possesses. The Deathdealing is utilized again by Askin in chapter 635 when he is being chased by Grimmjow, and it's here where we are introduced to another aspect of the Deathdealing's power. This involves poison manipulation. This ability is actually foreshadowed within two different instances slightly earlier on in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, specifically in chapter 543, where during what was about to become a fight between Hashward and Bazb, Askin creates a strange orb that prevents the two of them from clashing. This orb was so dangerous that both Hashward and Bazb avoided making contact with it, which in my opinion really speaks as to how powerful the Deathdealing really is. Another instance is in chapter 635, where Askin decides to mess with Grimmjow for whatever reason as he makes him chase after him. Just as he does with Hashward and Bazb, he releases a very similar orb towards Grimmjow's direction. Grimmjow does actually make contact with the orb as he brushes it aside, but he then realizes its true power a second too late. After making contact with it, Grimmjow goes unconscious. This is where Askin refers to the ball as his gift as he reveals that it was actually poison. The specifics of this particular poison attack are unknown, but the poison was strong enough to knock out Grimmjow, which is definitely worth noting. The Deathdealing was so potent that it was in fact the schrift ability which ended up defeating the most characters within the final arc. Askin often pretends to be much weaker than he really is, but he proves himself to be one of the biggest threats amongst the Quincy. He successfully incapacitates true Shikai Ichigo with a ability that he calls the Poison Bath. Ignoring the fact that Ichigo was holding back his true power until he had fought Yhwach, this is still an impressive feat from Askin. The Poison Bath also affects Orihime and Chad, as he explains that this technique is also an aspect of his schrift, the Deathdealing, as he explains that this allows him to create an area where resistance to any substance is lowered. Fascinatingly, this ability doesn't seem to have lethal potential on its own, but it does link back to what he was explaining to Nimaya earlier, where he states that he needs to consume a substance in large quantities in order to effectively manipulate it. So if he desires to kill his enemy, then he needs to take time out in order to ingest massive amounts of a substance that he desires to manipulate. This is a very challenging thing to accomplish, as it leaves Askin open to attack until he has taken in enough of the substance for his ability, the Deathdealing, to work. This is by far one of the major weaknesses of his schrift ability. This is why his ability Poison Bath allows him to buy enough time to activate the Deathdealing. Yoruichi does suggest to Askin that it would be easier for him to weaken his opponents to the point where they are nearly dead, and then he can just use Poison Bath in order to eliminate them, but Askin believes that he is too good to do that, and he would rather use the full lethal variant of his schrift power. Up until this point in the video, the Deathdealing has shown itself to be very impressive, but it also appears to possess specific inherent weaknesses. Kubo has done a very good job in maintaining a sense of balance when it comes to this schrift ability. This is in contrast to some of the overpowered, broken schrifts that some of the other Schutzstaffel members possess. However, there is a bit more to the Deathdealing that we haven't touched upon, as this power appears again during Askin's battle against Yoruichi and Yushiro. Right off of the bat, Yoruichi makes quick work of Askin as she lands a devastating Raijin Senkai blast on him, which appears to have finished him off, but the Quincy surprisingly survives the attack, only to be met with an even more cruel assault by Yushiro, as this assault is what opens the door to one of my favorite power reveals in the story. Similar to a cockroach who doesn't know when to give up, Askin gets right back up and draws our attention to some words that he had shared with us a few chapters ago. He once again explains that his schrift ability allows him to manipulate the lethal doses of any substance that he has ingested huge amounts of. This explanation itself has many implications subtly woven into it. After literally consuming a lethal dose of whatever substance he desires, he actually gains immunity over it. In this situation, he ingested a lethal dose of Yushiro and Yoriichi's Reiatsu, as he then becomes completely immune to it. Within the world of Bleach, being immune to somebody's Reiatsu is pretty much a victory signal. Reiatsu is the currency that is used within the battles of Bleach, and even your non-supernatural attacks like physical slashes would require you to exert enough Reiatsu in order to overcome your opponents in order to hurt them. So if an opponent has gained complete immunity to all of your powers and your abilities, then unfortunately you're not going to win that fight. This highlights how ridiculously overpowered the Deathdealing really is. While it's not as broken as the X-axis or as ridiculous as Gerard's The Miracle, the Deathdealing is an ability that weaponizes the very mechanics behind the power system of Bleach. When Askin combines this with his lethal control of poison, he is almost unstoppable. I say almost because Urahara then appears and he is able to trigger Yoriichi's God of Thunder transformation as she acquires a counter to the Deathdealing. Askin's schrift ability doesn't give him immunity to Reiatsu as a concept, but only the Reiatsu of that individual whose power that he has endured. So after Yoriichi gains a form which allows her to change a Reiatsu quicker than Askin can gain immunity to it, it removes his immunity from the equation. Think of it as the flu shot. During the winter season, you'll get a flu shot which will protect you from the variant of the flu from that particular year, but as flu strains evolve, it requires you to then get a top-up flu shot the next year in order to protect you from the new, more prevalent strain that is going around. While in a real-world scenario, we have several months to prepare for flu season. In the context of Askin's battle against Yoriichi, he had little to no time to develop immunity to Yoriichi's constantly changing Reiatsu. Now, despite this temporary advantage, Askin ends up activating his holy form, as this then allows him to figure out Reiatsu at its most basic level, enabling him to retain his immunity against an individual's Reiatsu, even if the Reiatsu ends up changing. With his holy form activated, it also takes him a shorter amount of time to gain immunity over a specific substance. He then also pulls off his biggest technique, which is called Gift Ball Deluxe. He creates a oversized gift ball around his body. It is so big that it engulfs multiple buildings in the surrounding area, as this is one of the largest gift balls that Askin is able to create. This ability was so potent that it had forced Urahara down to a single knee as he had started to sweat. In order to make sure that his victims remain trapped within the gift ball, he places several interconnected spheres of light called the Poison Realm on the outermost barrier of the Gift Ball Deluxe. The inclusion of Poison Realm makes it virtually impossible to escape the Gift Ball Deluxe. So while nobody is able to exit the Gift Ball, the Poison Realm does not prevent people from entering. This weakness can allow an opponent who is outside of the barrier to catch Askin off guard with a surprise attack. The Gift Ball Deluxe allows Askin to increase the poison concentration even further as the shape of the Gift Ball Deluxe alters, becoming more and more narrower as it progressively forms into a tip. Askin subconsciously is able to restrict the power of the Gift Ball Deluxe because he is afraid of his own power affecting himself too. Unfortunately, this is all that we see of the Gift Ball Deluxe until Askin is killed by Grimmjow. This is explained off as Askin was not immune to Grimmjow's Reiatsu, so he was able to sneak into the Gift Ball Deluxe and thus able to deliver a fatal blow from behind, literally impaling him with Grimmjow's signature one-handed impale as he tears out his heart, holding it in his hand. So as powerful and potent as the Deathdealing was, one of its main weaknesses is simply facing off against a large enough attack from someone whose Reiatsu that Askin is not immune to. I do believe that Askin's battle was rushed in the end, and he most certainly deserved way more screen time than he had gotten. I am very confident that the final battle between Urahara and Askin will definitely be expanded upon in the anime, and I don't think that this is the last that we've seen of the Deathdealing. It was definitely a fantastic power which was worthy of being showcased during the endgame of the 1000-Year Blood War arc. Both Askin and the Deathdealing deserved much better within the manga, and I'm really looking forward to more anime exclusive scenes involving Askin and his schrift power. So we've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you think about this incredible schrift ability? Being able to calculate and manipulate the lethal dose of any substance is a very formidable power. I'd love to know all of your thoughts about the strengths and weaknesses of the Deathdealing, and I look forward to reading all of your speculation as to how the Deathdealing can be expanded upon within the anime. Definitely continue the discussion under this video, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.